We were talking in the previous presentation about the radius, and so let's take a look again at a couple of things here. And so these are the structures we need to be able to see. I'm sorry, we were talking about the ulna, the coronoid process, the olecranon process, the radial notch, the trochlear notch, and the styloid process. So if we look at the appendicular skeleton on the virtual lab, you can see these structures just a little bit better, I believe. So let's take a look here. Again, we have the olecranon process, the trochlear notch, that is that little groove that articulates with the humerus at our elbow. We've got the coronoid process. There's this little radial notch here, which is where the head of the radius is located, and there's the styloid processes. And between the radius and the ulna, these two processes allow us to hold our wrist in place. So let's go back now and we'll look at these things through that anatomy learning program that we were looking at earlier. And again, this is our elbow, and we can rotate just a little bit, and you can identify some of the structures there. You can see the trochlea, and you can see the trochlear notch. There's the coronoid process. This is the capitulum, and this is the head of the radius, which articulates with the capitulum. So let's take a look now at the radius. And first, just a quick overview. This is the outer bone on the thumb side. And so when we take a radial pulse, we are dealing with the radius. And there's the head. There is the radial tuberosity. And I don't know that I mentioned earlier, but raised surfaces on bones, a lot of them have T words like tuberosity, trochanter, tubercle, things like that. Whereas indentations, we have a lot of F words like fossa, foramen, fet, and those are associated with indentations. So by the end of this activity, you will know all of your F words. Now, let's take a look at the bony markings associated with this. We have the anatomical neck. The whole structure here is the head. We have the radial tuberosity, which is this raised area here. We have sort of the distal end, and right here is the styloid process associated with that. And you can take a look here and see that between the styloid process, which is over here on the ulna, and the styloid process that's on the radius, that is holding our wrist into position. Now, let's go and take a look at the hands. And in looking at the hands, we can see that first off at the wrist, we have lots of little bones. We have 8 bones, which are considered short bones, and that's just because they are no longer than they are wide, really. Whereas these bones, the radius and the ulna and the humerus, are considered long bones. And if you take a look here, you can see these 8 bones actually allow things to slide around a little bit. If we go and look at the specifics here, well, yeah, these things do have specific names. These have specific names. Fortunately for you, you don't have to learn all of the names, so you don't need to know trapezium and scaphoid and lunate and pisiform and so forth. All you need to know is that these 8 bones together are called the carpals. Now, there is an interesting aspect here. Is if you look at the tubercle on the scaphoid and we've got a hook that's on the hamulus, well, there is a strip of connective tissue called the retinaculum that connects between those two. And the tendons that operate our fingers, the muscles for our fingers are located in the forearm, but the tendons go right through here. And so this is the carpal tunnel. And we also have a nerve that passes through here. And when you bend them like that, what happens is that those tendons have to make a turn. And ultimately, that can lead to inflammation and carpal tunnel syndrome. So that's really all we need to know there is just carpals. Other bones of the hand include the metacarpals, and these are the ones that go across the palm. Don't really need to know anything about them except that we've got 5 metacarpals and that they are located in the palm. So you can see those. These are also considered long bones. And we've got phalanges. And phalanges just make up the fingers. There's usually 3 bones except for the thumb, which has 2. Now, so we've got the proximal phalanx, the middle phalanx, the distal phalanx. Again, you don't need to know all of those. Just know that the fingers are the phalanges. Now, the mnemonic that helps me remember that, it's kind of weird, but if you remember Phoebe from Friends, she had a pseudonym that she used, sort of an alter ego, when she didn't want to tell people her real name. She would go by the name Regina Phalange. And also, Phoebe was a masseuse, so she used her hands to work. So when I think of phalanges, I think of Regina Phalange, and I think of Phoebe from Friends. Now we get to go and start looking at the lower limbs. And we're going to look at the coxal bone, which makes up part of the hip. And it is composed actually of 3 separate bones, which are the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. And there's lots of structures on there, but I mostly want you to know the iliac crest, the symphysis pubis, and this structure called the acetabulum. Also, I'm going to talk just a little bit about differences between the male and female pelvis. So let's go and take a look at some of these other bones of the appendicular skeleton. So we're going to go back, and we're going to go to the bones of the lower limb. And first off, while we said that the sacrum, which is this portion here, is part of the axial skeleton, it attaches to the coxal bone. And the coxal bone is actually composed of 3 separate bones. We've got, there we go, the os coxae. So we've got 3 structures that make up this coxal bone. Now, you can see that there's lots of parts that are indicated here, but we don't need to know all of those. What you should be able to do is identify the iliac crest. You should be able to identify the ilium, which is this overall upper part of the bone. Should be able to identify the ischium, which is this posterior part of the bone. This is basically your butt bone, you know, and the pubis, which is this anterior portion. All three of these merge together into this area, which is known as the acetabulum. So when we take a look at this, let's take a look at this again.
This was going to run long, so we stop here and we'll pick up with this in the next video.